Brittany, what the hell are you doing out here? You're soaking wet. Nicholas Perry Harding slammed his car door and stored into the storm. All he saw was Brittany Hayes, his maid, sitting under the tree with a small lunchbox on her lap, her blue uniform clinging to her skin, her hair plastered against her face. She looked half frozen, spoon in hand, trembling. Brittany, he barked again, voice sharp with disbelief. Why the hell are you eating out here? Get inside. She flinched, startled like a frightened animal, snapping the lid of her plastic box shut. Her lips moved, but the words drowned in the rain. I'm sorry, sir, she managed, eyes fixed on the ground. I didn't mean. Before Nicholas Perry could ask more, a voice floated from behind him, measured, calm, and practiced. She shouldn't even be here, sir, said Ashley Thompson, the housekeeper, stepping under her umbrella with perfect poise. I was just about to report her. She broke the Harding heirloom vase this afternoon, the crystal one from your grandmother's collection. Nicholas Perry turned sharply. What? Ashley Thompson sighed, lowering her gaze with feigned regret. I found it shattered near the dining hall. She was alone there. I tried to reason with her, but she refused to admit it. Brittany's head shot up, panic flashing in her eyes. No, sir, please. That's not true. Nicholas Perry, face hardened. That vase had been in his family for 3 generations. His mother's memory lived in it. You broke it? He demanded. After everything you've been told about that room. I didn't, sir. Brittany's voice cracked. I was cleaning the hallway when Ashley Thompson. Enough. His voice thundered, cutting through the rainfall. The veins in his neck stood out. Don't you dare lie to me. I can't stand dishonesty in my house. The outburst startled her so badly that she stumbled backward. Her heel slipped on the wet stone and she fell, scraping her palm against the rough gravel. The lunchbox tumbled from her hand, spilling its soggy rice and beans across the ground. Blood mingled with rainwater near her hand. But she didn't cry. She just looked up at him, eyes wide and glistening with something between shame and heartbreak. I didn't do it, she whispered, voice trembling but steady. Please believe me. Nicholas Perry stood over her, chest rising and falling with anger and confusion. Behind him, Ashley Thompson's expression remained perfectly composed, her tone silky. She's been careless for weeks, sir. I warned her she wasn't fit for delicate work. Ma turned toward the housekeeper, desperate. You know that's not true. You told me to polish the display cabinet, and then you... She stopped, breath hitching, as Ashley Thompson's cold eyes met hers. The older woman's lips curved into the faintest warning smile, almost invisible to Nicholas Perry. Brittany swallowed her words, trembling. Nicholas Perry ran a hand through his soaked hair, exhaling sharply. I don't want to hear another word tonight. Clean this up. We'll discuss it tomorrow. He turned away, anger and exhaustion swirling inside him like the storm itself. Ashley Thompson nodded obediently. Of course, sir. I'll see that she tidies the mess. Brittany pressed her bleeding hand against her apron and whispered, Yes, sir. Her voice was barely audible. An hour earlier, before the storm broke, the mansion had been quiet. In the main hallway, the crystal vase, a priceless relic, had stood gleaming atop a pedestal. Brittany had been dusting the nearby cabinet when Ashley Thompson appeared, arms folded. You Mr. Spot, the woman said coolly, tapping her finger against the wood. Brittany turned to answer and flinched as Ashley Thompson's elbow brushed the pedestal. The vase tipped, fell, and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. Brittany froze, eyes wide for a second, then narrowed with calculation. Oh my, she murmured. What have you done? It wasn't me, you quiet. Ashley Thompson hissed, stepping closer, her voice low and venomous. No one saw what happened. If you want to keep your job, you'll take the blame. Otherwise, I'll tell Mr. Harding you were stealing from the kitchen again. Understand? Brittany shook her head, tears welling. Please, I can't. Then leave. Pack your things and get out before he comes home. Go sit outside until I decide what to tell him. The older woman's smile was almost gentle. And remember, dear, silence is safer than unemployment. That's how Brittany ended up outside in the rain, clutching her small meal like it was the only thing she owned. Inside, Nicholas Perry stood by the fireplace in his study, staring into the flames. He had changed clothes, but the chill of guilt lingered on his skin. He poured himself a bourbon, trying to drown the sound of her trembling voice in his mind. Ashley Thompson's story had been convincing, but something didn't sit right. Brittany's eyes had held something he couldn't name. Fear? Yes, but not the fear of a liar. He turned toward the window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the view of the garden. She was still there. He could just make out her silhouette under the oak. Nicholas Perry sighed. "Damn it," he muttered. "Why didn't she just go inside?" A soft knock at the door startled him. "Come in." It was Henry. The gardener, an older man in his 60s, soaked from head to toe, his cap dripping rain onto the rug. In his callous hand, he held a small USB stick wrapped in a plastic bag. "Sir," Henry said quietly, glancing toward the window. I think you should see this before you make any decisions about Miss Hayes." Nicholas Perry frowned. "What is it?" Henry hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Security footage. I installed a backup camera outside the east corridor by the dining hall. Ashley Thompson didn't know. I saw what really happened." Nicholas Perry stared at him. "What do you mean?" Henry extended the USB. "The vase. She's been bullying that girl for months, sir. Making her clean double shifts, yelling at her when you're not around. Today, she broke it herself and then blamed Brittany. No." The room went utterly still. Nicholas Perry slowly took the USB, his hand tightening around it. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. "You're sure?" Henry nodded grimly. "Saw it with my own eyes before the rain cut the feed. She threatened to fire me if I ever said a word. But I can't stand by and watch her ruin that girl. Not after tonight." Nicholas Perry's throat felt dry. He turned toward his desk, staring at the small drive in his palm. The weight of it felt heavier than gold. "Thank you, Henry," he said quietly. "That will be all." When the gardener left, closing the door behind him, Nicholas Perry sank into his chair. For a long moment he simply stared at the rain. Then, slowly, guilt began to seep in cold and relentless. He replayed the image in his mind. Brittany's terrified eyes, her bleeding hand, the lunchbox spilled into the mud. He had shouted at her. He had believed the lie. He ran a hand over his face, whispering, "God, what have I done?" Outside, the rain eased into a soft drizzle. Under the oak, Brittany still sat, unaware that the truth now rested inside a small silver drive on Nicholas Perry Harding's desk. And for the first time in years, the billionaire felt something unfamiliar clawing at his chest, remorse. If this story touched your heart, give it a like and tell us where you're watching from. You might just find someone nearby feeling the same. The storm had calmed into a steady drizzle by the time Nicholas Perry Harding sat back in his leather chair, the USB drive lying untouched beside his laptop. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting shadows against the bookshelves lining the study. But Nicholas Perry barely noticed. His fingers tapped against his chin, his thoughts circling like a hawk over prey. He should have plugged the USB in the moment Henry left. He should have verified what the gardener claimed, but somehow he already knew it was true. The image of Brittany curled beneath the oak tree haunted him, the soaked uniform, the blood-streaked hand, the silent acceptance of blame. And he had believed Ashley Thompson. He had believed her without hesitation, without listening. Nicholas Perry closed his eyes, ashamed. His mother had always told him, "Don't judge a person by the words of someone who's never stood in their shoes." And yet, tonight, he had judged Brittany with the cold precision of a boardroom executive, not a human being. He reached for the USB, inserted it into his laptop, and clicked open the only video file. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. The East Corridor camera showed Ashley Thompson briskly walking past the display case. She turned abruptly, elbow catching the pedestal. The vase wobbled, then crashed to the marble floor in 1,000 glittering shards. Nicholas Perry leaned forward. Brittany entered the frame seconds later, her body language hesitant, confused. Ashley Thompson's expression changed immediately, cold, accusatory. She stepped into Brittany's space, gesturing aggressively. Though the footage had no sound, it was unmistakable. She was blaming Brittany. Then Ashley Thompson grabbed Brittany's arm. Nicholas Perry's jaw clenched. She was pulling her, leading her, no, pushing her toward the back entrance, toward the garden. The timestamp read 5:47 p.m. Nicholas Perry looked at the clock on the mantel. It was just past 7 p.m. She'd been outside that entire time. He paused the video, staring at the still image. A white woman in a crisp uniform, standing over a young black maid pointing a finger seething. He felt something twist in his chest. Not just guilt rage. How long had this been happening under his roof? He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. Without thinking, he grabbed an umbrella and walked out of the study. The drizzle chilled his face the moment he stepped into the courtyard. His breath fogged in the cool October air. The security lights along the pathway flickered to life as he neared the tree. Brittany hadn't moved. She was still sitting beneath the oak, legs folded to one side, her uniform soaked through. Blood dried dark on her palm. The lunchbox lay beside her, closed now, but clearly ruined. She didn't look up as he approached. Only when his shadow blocked what little light filtered from the house did she lift her eyes, slow and uncertain. He stopped a few feet away. "Brittany," she blinked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, sir, you're hurt." She glanced down at her hand. "It's nothing. I was wrong." She looked at him now, full and direct. Her eyes were tired, not just from today, but from months, maybe years of being unseen. "I watched the footage," he said quietly. "The camera outside the dining corridor. I saw everything." Brittany's breath caught. "Then you know?" He nodded. Ashley Thompson's voice, earlier so calm and composed, now seemed like venom echoing in his ears. Nicholas Perry had trusted that voice. He had built his household on structure and efficiency, letting Ashley Thompson run it like a machine. And in doing so, he had allowed rot to grow in the foundation. "She broke it. She blamed you. She pushed you out here." Brittany looked down, her fingers curled into her lap. "I tried to tell you. I know." His voice softened. "And I didn't listen." A long silence passed between them. Rain dripped from the branches above, soaking his shoulders now, too. But he didn't care. "I'm not going to ask why you didn't fight back," he said, "because I think I already know." She lifted her head just a little. "You were afraid. You've probably had to be afraid for a long time about losing your job, about not being believed, about someone like me not caring." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She had likely cried all her tears already. "I won't make that mistake again," Nicholas Perry said. A breeze moved through the trees. He took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She hesitated, then clutched it tightly around herself. It was absurdly large on her, but warm. "Come inside. Let me clean your hand," he said. "I don't want to cause more trouble." "There's no more trouble to cause. Ashley Thompson's finished here. Effective immediately." That caught her off guard. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. "I'll make sure she never works in another household again. And you won't sit out here in the rain again, ever." He extended a hand. For a moment, Brittany looked at it, as if unsure whether it was real. Then, slowly, she placed her injured hand into his. He helped her to her feet. As they walked back toward the house, the rain began to fade, as if the storm had done what it came to do, and now it too was ready to move on. Inside the kitchen, under soft pendant lighting, Nicholas Perry gently wrapped a clean white cloth around Brittany's hand. She sat silently on a stool, watching him work. She still wore his coat. "You have a son?" he said, suddenly not looking up. "Jose, right." Her eyes widened. "How do you, Henry told me. Said he saw drawings in your apartment." She nodded, eyes softening. "He wants to be a doctor." Nicholas Perry tied off the bandage and looked at her. "Let's make sure he gets that chance." Brittany stared at him. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. "You don't have to thank me," he said gently. "Just promise me you'll never believe you deserve less than the truth again." She lowered her head, and for the first time that day, her shoulders shook, not from cold, but from release. Nicholas Perry stood silently, letting her have this moment. Outside, the last drops of rain tapped gently against the windows. Tomorrow would be a different day. Nicholas Perry Harding hadn't slept. The mansion had fallen into its usual late-night hush, distant hums from the central heating, the rhythmic ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the hallway, but none of it soothed him. He had sent Brittany home 2 hours earlier, offering her a ride, which she politely declined. I prefer the walk, she had said. It helps me clear my head. He had watched her go, still wearing his coat, her back straight, despite everything. Now Nicholas Perry stood alone in his study again, the USB still plugged into his laptop. He had watched the video 5 more times since Brittany left. Each time it hurt more. How many months had this been going on? How many mornings had she arrived early, hoping for kindness, but receiving cruelty? How many meals had she skipped to send Joe's medication money? How many things had he missed? Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't look. Nicholas Perry poured a cup of black coffee, skipped the sugar, and walked slowly toward the hallway. It was time. He pressed the intercom button. "Ashley Thompson, please come to the main office." 5 minutes later, she entered. Perfect posture, dark wool dress, calm eyes. "You called, Mr. Harding?" she asked, folding her hands in front of her like a cathedral statue. Nicholas Perry gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "Sit." She did. "I've seen the footage." She tilted her head slightly, feigning confusion. "Footage." Nicholas Perry clicked the spacebar. The screen lit up. Ashley Thompson knocking over the vase. Ashley Thompson pointing fingers. Ashley Thompson pushing Brittany out the back door like an unwanted animal. He paused at mid-frame. Her finger pointed inches from Brittany's face. Ashley Thompson's mask cracked just slightly. "Ah, that camera. I wasn't aware Henry had installed that." Nicholas Perry's voice was cold. "No, you weren't." She didn't flinch. "What would you like me to say?" Nicholas Perry leaned forward. "I'd like you to say why." Ashley Thompson sat straighter, eyes narrowing. And for the first time in years, she spoke not as the housekeeper, but as the woman behind the role. "She doesn't belong here," she said evenly. "She walks too softly. She acts like a victim. It makes the other staff nervous." Nicholas Perry stared at her because she's quiet. Because she plays quiet. Don't be fooled, sir. Girls like her, they know how to manipulate sympathy, tears, obedience. They work their way up into your favor while you sleep. His fingers clench the arms of his chair. "She has a child, Ashley Thompson. She's working 2 jobs to survive. You bullied her, threatened her, and blamed her for something you did. And when she didn't fight back, you called that weakness." "She was never one of us," Brittany replied, her voice calm as marble. "I kept this house running for 16 years. Clean, orderly, proper. You didn't notice things like broken schedules or food missing from pantries or staff falling behind because I handled it. Now you'll let it rot because you want to play hero for the help." Nicholas Perry stood slowly. "Get out." "No," she blinked. "Excuse me. You're done here. Take your thing. The driver will take you wherever you want, but your time at Harding Estate is over." Her composure faltered. "You would throw me out for her?" "No," Nicholas Perry said evenly. "I'm throwing you out because I let your poison infect my house for far too long." Ashley Thompson stood. She adjusted her jacket. "You'll regret this." "No," he replied. "I regret not seeing you for what you are." She left without another word. The next morning, the house felt different, not quieter. Nicholas Perry had expected that, but cleaner in a way that had nothing to do with polish or dust. Vera, one of the younger maids, approached Nicholas Perry outside the breakfast room. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For her?" Nicholas Perry nodded. He didn't need more. He called the household staff together that afternoon. Standing beneath the crystal chandelier of the grand hallway, he looked out at the people he had barely known until yesterday. "Brittany Hayes is no longer a housemaid," he said clearly. "Effective today, she will assist me directly in internal affairs and household oversight. Her son's medical needs are now covered by the family trust. If anyone has a problem with this, my door is open." No one moved. Then slowly, Vera clapped. Others followed. Nicholas Perry turned and walked away, unsure if the ache in his chest was guilt, pride, or something else entirely. Across town, in a 2-bedroom apartment, tucked between a grocery store and a laundromat, Brittany helped Jose with his spelling homework. He sat cross-legged on the carpet, pencil in hand, brow furrowed. "How do you spell honor again?" She smiled. "Honor. Remember? No. Ooh, that's the British way." Jose grinned. "One day I'll be a doctor. Then I'll buy you a real lunchbox." She laughed softly. "Deal." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number from Nicholas Perry Harding. Let's discuss your schedule tomorrow. We have some changes to make. Starting with no more lunches in the rain. Brittany stared at the screen. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Not from pain, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years. The quiet warmth of being seen. Brittany returned to the Harding estate the next morning, under a sky painted in soft October gold. The rain had passed, leaving behind a stillness that blanketed the estate in morning dew. Everything looked different, cleaner somehow. Not in appearance, but in spirit. As she stepped through the staff entrance, she felt something strange beneath her feet. The absence of tension. No one avoided her gaze. No one whispered behind her back. Vera, the young housemaid, offered a smile and a gentle, "Good morning, Miss Brittany," as she passed. "Miss Brittany." Brittany gave a shy nod in return. Adjusting the borrowed blazer, Nicholas Perry had insisted she wear her uniform was folded neatly in her bag. Today she was not here as help. Today she was stepping into a new role, one that felt both foreign and long overdue. Nicholas Perry was waiting for her in the East Wing office, formerly used only for accounting and storage. Now it had been emptied and freshly arranged with a desk, a laptop, and a chair facing a window that overlooked the garden. "Morning," he greeted, without looking up from his phone. "Good morning, Mr. Harding," she replied softly. "You can call me Nicholas Perry here, if that's okay." She paused. "All right, Nicholas Perry." He looked up then, his face open and more rested than she'd seen it in weeks. "There's coffee brewing in the side room. I had them stock tea, too. Thought you might prefer that." "I do, thank you." They stood in silence for a beat. Then he gestured toward the desk. "That's yours. You'll be helping me with internal management schedules, staff needs, rotation adjustments, and anything else that's fallen between the cracks." Brittany stepped closer, running her hand lightly across the desk's edge. It was made of real oak, worn but beautiful. A tree repurposed, given new life like her. Nicholas Perry watched her, then cleared his throat. "I also spoke to the foundation this morning. We're setting up a medical trust for Jose. Full coverage, doctor visits, medications, future needs." Her head jerked toward him. "You don't have to do that. I know," he said gently, "but I want to. He's a good kid, and you're a good mother." Emotions swelled in her throat, too sharp to swallow. "Thank you." He smiled, small and sincere. "You've thanked me enough. Let's get to work." Mid-morning, Brittany walked through the house with a clipboard and pen, relearning the estate through new eyes. It wasn't just where she scrubbed floors and changed linens anymore. Now it was a network of people, systems, cracks that had been painted over for years. She passed through the laundry corridor where two maids folded towels and practiced rhythm. "Miss Brittany," one of them said quietly, "we're glad you're still here." Brittany paused. "Thank you, Janet. Eleanor always said you were just temporary." The other maid added, "That you wouldn't last, but you did." Brittany smiled. "Small but real. I'm not going anywhere. Me." That afternoon, Nicholas Perry called her into the main office. He was reviewing a spreadsheet on staff turnover. His tone was lighter now, tinged with curiosity. "Did you know we've lost 6 housekeepers in 2 years?" he asked. Brittany raised an eyebrow. "I didn't, but I'm not surprised." He looked up. "You think that was Ashley Thompson's doing?" "I think she created an environment people didn't want to survive in," Brittany replied. "Fear doesn't build loyalty." Nicholas Perry leaned back, fingers steepled. "And you? Why did you stay?" She hesitated. "Because I didn't have the luxury to leave." He nodded slowly. "Fair answer." There was a knock at the door. Henry the gardener stepped in, hat in hand. "Beg your pardon, sir, Miss Brittany." He gave her a respectful nod. Nicholas Perry motioned him in. "You don't need to knock any more, Henry." The old man smiled. Habit. He looked at Brittany. "Just wanted to say thank you for staying strong and for making this place a little less cold." Brittany's eyes softened. "You're the one who stood up when it mattered." Henry shook his head. "Took me too long. I was scared, too." Nicholas Perry glanced between them. "I think a lot of us were, but not anymore." Later that evening, after the last of the staff had left, and the house lights dimmed to a gentle glow, Brittany wandered out to the garden, She walked past the hedges, down the stone path, and stopped beneath the oak tree, the same place she had sat just 2 nights ago, bleeding and silent. Now the air was quiet, the tree still damp from the past storm. She looked up through the branches and exhaled slowly. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about victory. It was about breathing freely again. Behind her, footsteps crunched the gravel. "I figured I'd find you here," Nicholas Perry said. She turned slightly. "Just needed a minute," he nodded, standing beside her. "You know, for the longest time, I thought this place ran like a machine. Efficient, predictable. But I never stopped to ask what was grinding underneath it." She looked at him, uncertain. He glanced up at the branches. "I had no idea the strongest person in this house was sitting under this tree." Brittany smiled faintly. "I wasn't trying to be strong. I just didn't have another choice." Nicholas Perry reached into his coat and pulled something from his pocket. It was a small object wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it gently to reveal a ceramic figurine, old, cracked at the base, but familiar. "My mother gave this to me when I was 10, he said. "I dropped it once, broke the corner. I hid it from her for weeks. Thought she'd be furious." "What happened?" Brittany asked. She said, "Things break, Nicholas Perry. That's how we know they're real." He looked at her. "I think people are the same way." Brittany's breath caught. He handed her the figure. "Keep it. A reminder that not everything broken stays broken." She took it carefully, fingers brushing his for a moment. "Thank you, Zaro." They stood in silence, the last rays of sun fading behind the estate. And for the first time, Brittany didn't feel like the help. She felt like someone who belonged. The kitchen had always been a place of echoes, the clang of pans, the low murmur of gossip, the rush of running water over porcelain. For most of her time at the Harding estate, Brittany had moved through this space like a whisper, unnoticed, efficient, forgettable. Now, as she stepped into the staff kitchen, not as a servant, but as someone with a voice, the room paused. Janet and Vera were at the prep counter slicing fruit for the next morning's breakfast trays. They looked up when she entered just a moment, but this time they didn't look away. "Miss Brittany," Vera said with a nod. "Fresh coffee's brewing if you want some." "Thank you," Brittany replied with a soft smile, setting her tablet on the counter. "Don't let me interrupt. I'm just doing a quick walk through." She moved past the pantry shelves, noting inventory tags, expired labels, missing equipment, a routine task, but one that had never been hers to perform before. Ashley Thompson used to handle all kitchen audits herself, often with threats rather than feedback. Now Brittany approached it differently. She leaned slightly toward Vera. "Have you had any issues with late deliveries lately? I noticed the eggs were short again." Vera shrugged. "Happens once or twice a month. Ashley Thompson used to say it was our fault. Said someone was sneaking extras for home." Brittany raised an eyebrow. "Was that true?" Janet shook her head. "Not unless someone was feeding a family of 12 with one pocket." They all laughed briefly, the tension breaking like a brittle shell. Brittany scribbled a note on her tablet. "I'll follow up with the supplier, and I'll make sure nobody gets accused again without proof." Janet tilted her heel. "It's strange hearing that from someone who used to get blamed first." Brittany's smile didn't fade. "It's strange saying it, but we're doing things differently now." Nicholas Perry watched from the hallway. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but as he passed the service wing, he'd seen Brittany through the small glass window on the kitchen door, head tilted, listening to the staff, not barking orders or carrying herself with new power. She hadn't changed who she was. She had simply arrived. He continued walking. There were more changes to make. That afternoon, Brittany met Nicholas Perry in the study, now converted into a joint operations room for household affairs. She carried 2 reports, one on food inventory, the other on maintenance delays. He was reviewing the estate's financial reports on a second monitor. Nicholas Perry looked up as she entered. "How's the kitchen?" "Lighter," she replied. "Less fear, more fruit," he chuckled. "We'll call that progress." She handed him the reports. "We also need to talk about the laundry schedule. Janet's doing double shifts without complaint, but she's starting to limp. She won't say anything. She's too proud." Nicholas Perry glanced over the pages. "Let's cut her hours by 20% and increase her pay." "I'll absorb the budget adjustment," Brittany blinked. "That's generous." Generosity, Nicholas Perry said, not looking up, isn't charity, it's responsibility. She nodded slowly, committing the phrase to memory. Nicholas Perry glanced at her. You're good at this, Brittany. I'm just doing what should have been done all along. He watched her for a beat longer. That's the part people overlook. The things no one notices until they stop happening. In the late afternoon, the house was quiet again. Brittany stepped into the formal sitting room, the place she used to avoid whenever there were guests. Once she had sat in the corner with her lunch while Ashley Thompson's voice hissed behind her back. She should eat somewhere else. The bleach smell clings to the air. Now she sat briefly on the edge of the velvet settee and looked out the window. From here she could see the oak tree in the garden standing proud and scarred. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Vera. Just wanted to say thank you again. It feels like we can breathe in this place now. Brittany stared at the words for a moment, then typed back. We all deserve air. No one should have to ask for it. She hit send and leaned back, letting the sunlight warm her skin. That evening, Nicholas Perry joined her at the staff dinner table. The remaining employees looked surprised at first, but as the meal went on, simple roasted chicken, steamed greens and cornbread, the conversation turned natural. Vera told a joke. Henry laughed so hard his water spilled. Nicholas Perry, still in his dress shirt, but with sleeves rolled, listened more than he spoke. Brittany glanced at him once, catching the small crease in his brow, the one that only appeared when he was trying to understand, rather than command. After dinner, as the staff cleared the table, Nicholas Perry turned to her. I was thinking, he said, about starting a monthly meeting with the staff. Not just updates, real conversations. Brittany smiled. You ready for that? He gave a half smile. I'm ready to hear what I should have heard years ago. Later, Nicholas Perry walked Brittany to the door. The night was cool but calm. The stars above were sharp. The sky clean from days of rain. Thank you, Brittany, he said quietly. For what? She asked. For not quitting when I gave you every reason to. She looked up at him, eyes soft. I didn't stay for you, Nicholas Perry. I know. I stayed because people like Ashley Thompson don't get to decide where I belong. He nodded slowly, his throat tight. I'll see you tomorrow, she added. And with that, she stepped into the night, head held high, leaving Nicholas Perry standing at the door, watching the woman who had once sat in silence under a tree, now walking toward the future, on her own terms. The next morning arrived with a sharp chill in the air. The kind that hinted winter was just a few weeks away. Nicholas Perry stood at the window of his master bedroom, sipping his first coffee of the day. As he looked out at the garden, the leaves on the oak tree had begun to turn a mix of burnt orange and faded green. Even the tree seemed to be changing. His thoughts, as always now, drifted to Brittany. She had shown up every morning for the past week, precisely at 7 a.m. punctual, but never hurried. Dressed simply, always with a small notebook in hand, she moved through the estate with quiet authority. The staff had accepted her leadership more quickly than Nicholas Perry expected. Respect wasn't demanded. It had been earned long before anyone noticed. But today, he had something different in mind. He left the window and made his way down the east wing, past the sitting rooms and old family portraits, to a hallway few people used anymore. At the end of it, a door stood closed, polished oak, brass knob, untouched since his mother's death. Inside was a room no one had entered in years. He unlocked it with a key he hadn't used in a decade. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight, slicing through the tall windows. A leather armchair sat beneath a faded oil painting of his grandmother. Shelves lined the walls, books his mother had loved, medical journals and notes from her nursing days. On a small side table rested a framed photo, his mother holding him as a child, her face warm with pride. He stood there still, heart ticking slower. This had been her sanctuary. Before the cancer, before the long silences, Nicholas Perry hadn't had the heart to touch it. But now, for reasons he couldn't yet articulate, he knew it was time to open it again, not as a memorial, but as a gift. He pulled out his phone and texted Brittany. Meet me at the East Hall. Bring your planner. I have an idea. Brittany walked the corridor with measured steps. The hallway felt different, older, quieter. She paused when she reached the open door and saw Nicholas Perry inside, sleeves rolled up, brushing dust from the shelves. "I've never been down here," she said softly. "Most haven't," he replied, then gestured her inside. "This was my mother's room. She was a nurse. This is where she read, wrote, organized the charity drives." Brittany looked around, taking in the gentle clutter, the untouched love in the air. "It feels like her." Nicholas Perry nodded. "I want it to live again. I want it to be something real, not just a shrine." She turned toward him. "What do you want it to become?" He paused. "A wellness center for the staff, a quiet space, a reading room, a resource center, somewhere people can breathe." Brittany blinked. "That's incredible," he smiled. "I thought maybe you'd help me design it. You've got better instincts than I do about what people really need." "I'd be honored." They stood in the center of the room, two people standing in a place filled with history, about to create something new, a legacy not built on wealth or titles, but on healing. Later that day, Brittany returned to her small office in the East Wing. The quiet buzz of estate life moved around her footsteps, voices, doors closing, silverware clinking faintly from the dining area. She stared at her screen, working through staff schedules and supply orders, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Nicholas Perry and the room at the end of the hall. It felt like the estate was breathing for the first time. Just before lunch, Vera entered with a tray of coffee and 2 warm croissants. "You don't have to bring this," Brittany said. "I know," Vera replied with a grin. "But I like that you eat now." Brittany laughed. "Thanks." Vera sat on the edge of the desk. "You know, a few months ago, none of us thought you'd last here. Not because you weren't good, but because this house didn't let people like us stay." Brittany looked at her, and now Vera shrugged. "Now we're starting to believe maybe we're allowed to stay, maybe even belong." Those words stayed with Brittany long after Vera left. That evening, Nicholas Perry walked the garden, hands in his coat pockets. The stars were dim but steady above the trees. He paused beneath the oak, his usual spot for thinking. He heard the door behind him creak open, then soft footsteps. Brittany joined him, still in her office sweater, holding a thin file folder in one hand. "I finished the outline," she said, "for the wellness room." Nicholas Perry took the folder and flipped through it slowly. He recognized his mother's spirit in every idea. Quiet lighting, warm tones, journals for writing, resources for financial literacy, lists of therapists who took sliding-scale payments. He closed the folder. "This is more than I expected." "It's what I would have needed," Ma said. "A year ago, 5 years ago." He nodded. A long silence stretched between them. "You know," he said, glancing at her, "when I hired you, I didn't even remember your name." Brittany smirked faintly. "That's okay. You saw me eventually." "I did." He looked at her then. "Steady. And now, I don't want to look away." Her smile faded. "Not out of discomfort, but gravity. The weight of sincerity is always heavier than flattery." She nodded once, then don't. He took a step closer, not touching her, not crowding her, just near enough for her to feel it. "I won't." They stood under the tree in silence. No more rain, no more secrets, only truth. Finally allowed to speak. The weekend brought guests, not the lavish champagne-pouring kind Nicholas Perry had once entertained, but quieter visitors, long-time colleagues, a couple from his university days, and Dr. Russell Ames, a gay-haired philanthropist whose medical foundation had funded a wing at Yale. The Harding estate buzzed with renewed polish. The dining room gleamed, the grounds were immaculate, and fresh floral arrangements adorned the hallways. But Brittany felt the tension returning like a low thrum beneath the beauty. Vera approached her early Saturday morning, clutching a folded linen napkin. "They're already asking questions," she whispered. One of them asked if the new girl was the help or the help's manager. Brittany folded her arms. "What did you say?" Vera grinned. "I said, 'She's the reason this house still stands, ma'am.'" Brittany chuckled under her breath. "Remind me to give you a raise when I have that kind of power." Vera tapped her shoulder. "You already do. You just don't see it yet. Mix." Nicholas Perry met Brittany in the East Wing shortly before lunch. "They'll be staying until Monday," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Ames and his wife are in the master guest suite. The Clarks are in the north rooms. I want things comfortable but not showy. Brittany nodded. I've reviewed the dietary notes and sleeping preferences. Everything's in place. Nicholas Perry hesitated, then added, One more thing. Ashley Thompson used to keep a guest log. I want you to update it. Not just names, but observations, notes. We should be keeping track of who we let into this house. Brittany raised a brow. Surveillance. Context, he corrected. We've trusted too many masks in this house. I'd rather not make that mistake again. She nodded. Understood. Later that day, Brittany walked the corridors with her notebook in hand, discreetly observing, listening. She didn't insert herself into conversations she didn't need to. She already understood how power moved in a room, quietly, indirectly, often hidden behind the most gracious smiles. From behind a slightly agar door, she heard the voice of Mrs. Ames speaking on the phone. No, she's not staff anymore. Apparently something happened here. Some internal scandal. Nicholas Perry never said, but it's obvious. He's letting her roam like she owns the place. There was a pause. I'm not saying she's dangerous, but these people, when they're given power too quickly, it changes the whole balance. Brittany stood still, the notebook pressed against her chest like a shield. She knew better than to react, but her fingers tightened slightly. That evening, after the guests were settled and the dining room had been cleared, Nicholas Perry invited Brittany to the study. He was seated on the leather sofa, reading a paper from Dr. Plames's foundation, but looked up as she entered. How's the temperature out there? He asked. Cool. And measured. He tilted his head. Meaning? Meaning Mrs. Ames thinks I'm the wrong kind of story. Nicholas Perry's brow furrowed. You heard her, may not? He sighed, folding the paper. I should have known. It's all right, she said. People like her don't rattle me. They rattle me, he admitted, because they never see the harm they cause. They hide it behind polished words and checks with too many zeros. He stood, walked toward the fireplace, then turned to face her. You don't need my protection, he said, but I'm going to offer it anyway, not because you're vulnerable, but because they're dangerous. Brittany held his gaze. I don't need you to fight for me, Nicholas Perry. Just don't let them rewrite the truth when I'm not in the room. He nodded slowly. Deal. The next morning, Dr. Ames requested a tour of the house. Nicholas Perry asked Brittany to lead it. You sure? She asked. You know this place better than anyone, and frankly, I want them to see who's in charge now. She led the group through the estate with quiet confidence. She answered every question with poise, described the restoration efforts with knowledge that even Nicholas Perry hadn't realized she possessed. When they reached the wellness room, formerly his mother's retreat, she paused. This used to be Mrs. Harding's reading room, Brittany explained. Now it's a wellness space for staff, a quiet place to breathe. Doctor, Ames raised an eyebrow. Staff wellness? Nicholas Perry stepped beside her. A house is only as strong as the people who keep it standing. We've started treating them like human beings. Radical. I know. There was a tense silence before Dr. Ames nodded once. Progressive, but overdue. Brittany didn't smile. She didn't need to. The moment had landed. That night, after the guests had retired, Nicholas Perry found Brittany in the garden, seated beneath the oak tree. This time, she wasn't hiding. She was just thinking. He joined her without speaking. I used to be afraid of this tree, she said after a moment. It felt like the place you went when you weren't allowed inside. Nicholas Perry looked up at the dark branches. And now it's the place I come to remind myself how far I've come. He nodded. Funny how a place doesn't have to change to mean something entirely different. She glanced at him. The house hasn't changed. You have. I'm trying, he said. You're doing. No. They sat in silence, the wind rustling softly above them. From inside, the house hummed with quiet life. But out here, in the dark, the real story was unfolding, wordless and still, built on trust, resilience, and the power of staying. Monday morning arrived with fog resting low across the grounds like breath held too long. The estate was still waking. The staff moved in soft steps, careful not to disturb the calm left behind by the weekend's polished chaos. The guests had departed just after sunrise. Nicholas Perry had made sure of it. Brittany stood at the kitchen counter with her tea in hand, rereading a note left by Vera. They're gone. Left early. No hugs. She smiled. Vera always found a way to turn disdain into poetry. She tucked the note away and returned to her office. The house was hers again, but peace didn't linger long. 2 hours into her work, a courier arrived at the estate gates with a registered envelope. Security handed it to Nicholas Perry, who opened it in silence. He stared at the contents for a full minute before picking up the intercom. "Brittany, my office now, please." She entered cautiously. Nicholas Perry stood near the window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a folded piece of thick paper. His jaw was tense, his gaze on the lawn outside. "What is it?" she asked. He turned, handed her the document. She opened it slowly. It was a legal notice, an inquiry from the Ames Foundation regarding personnel reclassification at Harding Estate, and a concern about a potential conflict of interest in staff promotion practices. The language was sterile, wrapped in politeness, but the subtext was venomous. Brittany looked up. "They're trying to discredit you." He nodded. "And you?" She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "So, what do we do?" "We respond," he said, "with truth, facts, and a firm reminder that I don't answer to anyone's comfort zone." She lowered the paper. "They're not used to someone like me having a seat at the table. They'll get used to it." "No," she said, "they won't. But we're not doing this to make them comfortable." Nicholas Perry studied her. In her eyes he saw not fear but fire. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "of putting your name on the foundation documents, making it official." "Co-chair." Brittany blinked. "That's not necessary." "It is," he said, "because I didn't rebuild this house alone, and the future of it should reflect the truth." She hesitated, heart thudding. "You know what they'll say. They already said it." He stepped closer. "You've earned it, and they can't erase that unless you let them." She looked down at the paper again. The weight of a name was heavier than she'd imagined. It wasn't just about a title. It was about ownership, legacy, standing not behind someone's success, but beside it. After a long moment, she said quietly, "Then write it down. Brittany Hayes, co-chair." The announcement was subtle, an internal memo, an update to the estate's leadership records, a signature line added to the foundation's digital masthead. But word traveled faster than facts. By Tuesday morning, the calls started. Nicholas Perry ignored most of them. He answered only one from his lawyer, who told him, "It's not illegal. It's just provocative." "Good," Nicholas Perry said. "Maybe it's time they were provoked." Brittany kept her head down and her work steady, but the ripples came regardless. An anonymous email to the estate. "You're turning the Harding legacy into a joke." A printed letter unsigned. "Some traditions are meant to be preserved. Not everyone belongs in the front office." Brittany read them all once, then filed them away in a folder labeled Unsent Invitations. Vera, on the other hand, had her own way of processing. She posted a handwritten sign in the staff kitchen. "If you don't like the way things are changing, there's a door, and it ain't locked." By the end of the week, Nicholas Perry and Brittany sat together in the garden beneath the oak. He handed her a folder. "No legal threats this time, just numbers. I want you to review this," he said. "Scholarship proposals for a new fund under the Harding name for single parents, working class, no legacy donors, no gatekeeping." Brittany flipped through the pages. "This is bold. It's overdue." She looked up at him. "You're not afraid anymore." "I am," he admitted, "but I'm tired of letting fear build my ceiling." She closed the folder, placing it gently in her lap. "You know," she said, "I used to dream about escaping this place. Now I dream about what it could become." Nicholas Perry smiled. "Then let's make sure it becomes that." That night, she walked past the guest room where she once wasn't allowed. She opened the door just for a moment. It was empty now, but the air no longer felt hostile. She whispered into the silence, "I'm still here," and for the first time the room seemed to whisper back, "I know." The gallery hallway of the Harding estate was a silent corridor of legacy. Generations of portraits lined the walls, oil paintings in heavy frames, each face staring forward with quiet command. Nicholas Perry had passed them daily without pause, their gazes becoming no more noticeable than wallpaper. But now, as he and Brittany walked side by side through the hall, the silence felt expectant. "These," Brittany said softly, nodding toward the line of portraits. "Are all Hardings?" He nodded. "Everyone. My great-grandfather, grandfather, uncles. My mother's photo used to hang here too, but it's in storage now. Too modern, according to Ashley Thompson. Of course, Maya Merritt. Nicholas Perry stopped near the center of the hall. You know what they all have in common? She tilted her head. Power zero. He looked at her in silence. No journals, no letters, no diaries, just faces, no voices. She turned to him. You're changing that now. Nicholas Perry looked down the hallway. I want this house to speak again loudly. Honestly, Brittany stepped toward the far wall blank, except for a small brass plaque reading reserved. She traced the edge of the plaque with her finger. What's this for? He glanced at it. It used to be for the next Harding heir. I don't have children, so it's been waiting. No. Brittany raised an eyebrow. What if it didn't have to be blood? Nicholas Perry gave her a long, thoughtful look. Go on. You're building something new here, a new family in a way. What if this wall told those stories? Not just who you were born to, but who helped rebuild you. He nodded slowly. You want to put your picture on the wall? No, she said with a smile. I want to put their pictures. Vera, Henry, Janet, the real heartbeat of this house. Nicholas Perry exhaled through his nose, a sound between a laugh and a sigh that might upset a few board members. Good, Brittany replied. Later that afternoon, Nicholas Perry sat in his study with Henry, sipping coffee. You've been here 21 years, Henry. You've seen everything. The older man leaned back in the chair, his weathered hands resting on his knees. Seen too much, sir. Some things I'm not proud of keeping quiet about. Nicholas Perry nodded. You ever think about leaving? Henry shrugged. Plenty. But there was always someone worth staying for. At first it was your mother. Then it was the garden. Now it's Brittany. Nicholas Perry stared into his cup. I should have noticed sooner, he said. We all should have, Henry replied. But noticing late is better than never. Nicholas Perry looked up. She wants to create a wall of honor for the staff. Henry blinked. Us. She thinks the house should remember who really carried it. Henry's eyes shimmered slightly. Then he chuckled. Well, damn, never thought my face would end up framed in a place like this. Nicholas Perry raised his cup. It's about time. Brittany, meanwhile, had begun interviewing the staff. One by one. Not for performance reviews, but for their stories. She sat with Janet in the laundry room. How long have you worked here? Brittany asked. 14 years, Janet said. Started right after my husband passed. This job kept me fed, gave me something to hold on to. Brittany scribbled notes. What do you want people to remember about you? Janet chuckled. That I folded the cleanest bedsheets east of the Hudson. And Janet's eyes softened. That I tried to be kind even when it was hard. Brittany nodded. That's going on the wall. The new portrait wall came together in pieces. Nicholas Perry cleared the space, had the frames ordered, and let Brittany choose the first 5 names. They started with Henry, Vera, Janet, Rosa, the cook, and old Mr. Leonard, the estate driver who had retired 3 years earlier, but still visited on Sundays. Each photo would be simple, black and white, no makeup, no poses, just faces and one quote underneath words they chose themselves. Vera's read, I stayed to make noise, not to be quiet. Henry's, every seed I planted here grew something bigger than I expected. Mars wasn't up yet. She wasn't ready. That night, Nicholas Perry found Brittany alone in the archive room, sorting old photos from cardboard boxes Ashley Thompson had kept locked away. I found your mother's portrait, she said, holding up a photo in a thin silver frame. It was taken in the old reading room, sunlight across her cheek, a book in her lap. Nicholas Perry reached for it, his hand gentle. God, I haven't seen this since her funeral. She deserves her place back on the wall, Brittany said. She does, Nicholas Perry replied. So do you. No, my shuck hairhead. Not yet. He didn't push. Instead, he picked up an old box labeled letters M.H. Inside were dozens of envelopes, some unopened, many yellowed. Brittany reached for one and opened it slowly. It was a letter from Nicholas Perry's mother to a young patient. A handwritten note, simple and sweet, with a closing line. Even when you're scared, keep your eyes open. That's how you'll see who's walking beside you. Brittany folded the letter and handed it to him. She knew. Nicholas Perry looked down at the words. She knew everything. I'm only just learning now. They sat together in silence. boxes of forgotten history around them, the future quietly blooming in the house's old heart. The portraits would go up in the morning, and this time the walls would not whisper, they would speak. It was just past 7 a.m. when Brittany opened the front door of the Harding estate. The sky was still a sleepy grey dew on the grass, the world exhaling into a new day. She bent to retrieve the morning paper, as she had done for months, though the habit had outlived its necessity. Nicholas Perry had digital subscriptions now. Still, there was something grounding about the feel of newsprint in her hands. But today, the headline stopped her cold scandal in service. Harding Estate's rapid rise of former maid raises eyebrows. Ma stood still on the stone steps, the breeze cool against her arms. The article stretched across the top fold, in large sarapont, her name printed twice before the third paragraph. She didn't read it fully. She didn't need to. She could hear it between the lines already. Suspicion, innuendo, veiled racism wrapped in the language of public concern. A photo had been used too. One of her exiting the estate gates on foot, likely taken weeks ago. She looked tired in it. Of course she did. She took the paper inside, folded it carefully, and set it face down on the entryway table. Then she went to find Nicholas Perry. Nicholas Perry was in the study sipping his coffee and scanning emails when she entered. He looked up immediately. "You saw it?" "I did." He stood. "I'm sorry, Brittany. I should have known they'd escalate." She crossed her arms, not angry, just tired. "Who leaked it?" "Someone at the Ames Foundation, most likely." "It's coordinated. We've been flagged in a few social circles already. Nothing official, just whispers. But this makes it public." She nodded slowly. "And the board?" "I called an emergency meeting. They're not pulling support yet, but they're spooked." She studied him for a moment. "You don't look spooked." "I'm not," Nicholas Perry said, voice steady. "I'm angry." She stepped forward. "I don't need you to fight my battles, Nicholas Perry. I'm not. I'm fighting ours now." He picked up a thin folder from his desk and handed it to her. "Our response, a public letter from both of us." Brittany opened it and read the first lines aloud. "Transparency is not a scandal. Progress is not corruption. And power when shared does not lose its value. It multiplies it." She looked up surprised. "You wrote this?" "I had help, Henry. Actually, he said you'd never sign off unless you saw yourself in it." A small smile tugged at her lips. "He knows me well." Nicholas Perry walked over to the fireplace, leaning one hand on the mantel. "They're going to keep coming, Brittany. You know that." She nodded. "Then let them come." Later that morning, Brittany sat in her office, phone buzzing with notifications. Vera entered with a fresh cup of coffee and a pastry wrapped in a napkin. "You holding up?" Vera asked. "Barely." "You want me to go yell at someone downtown?" "I'll do it. I'll wear my church heels and everything." Brittany laughed. "No war crimes today, Vera. But thank you." Vera sat on the edge of the desk. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" "I did. I just didn't know it would feel like this." Vera softened. "You're not just some name they can chew up and spit out, Mia. You're proof that the old rules don't hold." Brittany looked down at the folded newspaper on the desk. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have stayed quiet. Let it be a job, not a movement." "Too late for that," Vera said gently. "You made us believe we could stand taller. You don't get to unring that bell." By afternoon, the estate was receiving emails of support from former employees, neighbors, even a couple of teachers from Hosa School. Some simply wrote, "I see her. I believe her. I'm glad she stayed." Brittany read each one slowly, tears she didn't mean to shed running unchecked down her cheek. That evening, Nicholas Perry held a press conference in the estate garden. Only a few reporters showed up in person, but the live stream gathered more than 20,000 viewers in the first hour. Brittany stood beside him, not behind. Nicholas Perry began. "This estate has stood for generations through wars, losses, and social shifts, but nothing has threatened it more than silence. Silence about who we are, about who we owe our success to. That ends now." He motioned toward Brittany. "This is Brittany Hayes. She helped rebuild this house, not with drywall or paint, but with truth, discipline, compassion, and integrity. She has earned every role she's taken here, not through favor, but through fire." Brittany stepped forward. She didn't speak from a podium. She simply looked into the camera and said, You don't need to believe in me, but believe in the people who clean your floors, raise your children, prepare your food. Because when you dismiss them, you dismiss the foundation you're standing on." The stream ended with applause, quiet at first, then growing. Back in the house, Henry placed a copy of the newspaper next to Brittany's earlier stack of staff portraits. Then, without a word, he tore the front page in half, folded it backward, and slid it underneath Brittany framed quote, "We all deserve air. No one should have to ask for it. Let them write what they want," he said. "This house remembers better." The weather shifted overnight. The sky turned steel grey, and a cold drizzle settled in a soft, persistent rain that blanketed the Harding estate in hushed tones. Brittany woke before sunrise, the sound of water tapping against the window like an old clock ticking. There was a heaviness in the air, not just from the weather, but something else. By 8 a.m., Nicholas Perry summoned her to the study. He was sitting at the desk, unusually quiet, a sealed manila envelope in front of him. His hair was still damp from the rain. A thin line of weariness carved beneath his eyes. "You all right?" Brittany asked gently. Nicholas Perry nodded once. "I need to show you something." She sat across from him, and he slid the envelope toward her. "I found this in one of the cabinets in Ashley Thompson's old quarters," he said. "It's my mother's original will, not the updated one the board used after her death. Misstilled. What does it say?" He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "It names me, of course, but more importantly, it references a trust, a quiet one for the staff." Brittany blinked. "A trust?" Nicholas Perry nodded. She left instructions to create a long-term wellness and education fund for anyone who had served more than 5 years under this roof. She named Henry, Janet, Rosa, even people who'd retired. Brittany stared at the envelope. "Why didn't anyone know about this?" "Because Ashley Thompson suppressed it," he said bitterly. She filed the revised version to the board, one that stripped all mention of the staff and consolidated the assets, probably told herself it was better for the estate, more controlled. Brittany's hands curled into fists in her lap. She stole their futures. "She did," Nicholas Perry said. "And I'm going to fix it." He opened a drawer, pulled out a legal pad with handwritten notes. "I've already contacted my attorney. We're establishing the fund exactly as my mother outlined, retroactively." Brittany felt her chest tighten. "They have no idea what this means for their families." "They will." Nicholas Perry looked at her now, eyes sharp, but filled with emotion. "I need you to help me tell them this. This isn't just a press move or a compensation plan. It's a legacy correction." She nodded slowly. "It's justice." By late afternoon, Brittany gathered the senior staff in the East Parlor. Henry, Vera, Janet, and a few others sat around, confused but calm. Rain tapped against the tall windows. Nicholas Perry entered quietly behind her. Brittany cleared her throat. "We found something. Something that belonged to Nicholas Perry's mother." She looked toward Nicholas Perry. He stepped forward, holding the original will. "This document," he began, "should have been shared years ago. It was written with the intent to honor those who built this house with their hands, their backs, and their time." He paused. "My mother believed the staff should share in the estate's growth. She set aside funds to ensure your children could go to school, your medical bills wouldn't crush you, and your retirement wouldn't feel like exile." Silence fell over the room. Henry rubbed at his eyes. Vera whispered, "Lord have mercy." Janet sat perfectly still. "She saw us, even when no one else did." Brittany smiled. "She saw you, and now everyone will." Nicholas Perry continued, "Each of you who served more than 5 years will receive a formal letter detailing the trust's distributions, education grants, wellness coverage, housing assistance if needed. This is not charity. This is overdue." A long pause. Then Henry, voice cracking, said, "If I'd known this was waiting for us all along, you would have stayed?" Nicholas Perry asked. "No," Henry said, shaking his head. "I would have believed more, believed we mattered." After the meeting, Brittany stood alone in the empty parlor, hand resting on the mantel. It felt surreal. Justice rarely arrived in neat envelopes, and when it did, it was almost always too late. But not this time. Nicholas Perry walked in and stood beside her, eyes on the fire. "She wrote it because she knew I might forget." He said that if I didn't have something in writing, I'd get lost in the noise. You didn't forget, Brittany said. I almost did, he replied, until you reminded me how to listen again. They stood in silence, the flames casting golden light on the framed photos lining the wall. Brittany turned to him. So what now? Now we rebuild the board, shift the power, protect the people who protect this house. And what about your name? She asked softly. Your legacy? Nicholas Perry glanced at her. My legacy is what they carry when I'm gone, not what's written in stone, what's lived. That evening, Vera found Brittany in the kitchen, leaning over the stove where a pot of soup simmered gently. You okay? Vera asked. Brittany looked up. Her face was softer, a little stunned. I think I'm finally catching up with myself. Vera chuckled. You ever going to put your picture up on that wall? Brittany smirked. Maybe when I'm done earning it. Vera waved her hand. Girl, please. You already earned it twice over. She stirred the pot, then added, You know what this reminds me of? My mama used to say, justice doesn't always knock loud. Sometimes it's just soup on the stove, and people finally sitting at the same table. Brittany smiled. Then we should serve them well. The conference room on the 34th floor of the Harding Global downtown office had once been Nicholas Perry's battlefield. Polished wood, clean lines, the skyline of Manhattan on display through floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a room designed to intimidate. But today, it was not the height of the building or the shine of the table that commanded the room. It was Brittany Hayes, seated calmly beside Nicholas Perry, her name now etched into the plaque before her. Brittany Hayes, co-chair. The board members shuffled in slowly, stiff collars and colder eyes. Most were older, gay-haired, legacy men and women who had dined with his parents, voted on generations of Harding decisions. A few nodded to Brittany, but most ignored her entirely. She didn't flinch. Nicholas Perry stood buttoning his jacket with care. Thank you all for joining on short notice. We have 2 items to address. One is financial, the other moral. He let that word hang in the air. Board chairwoman Margaret Ellison adjusted her glasses. We've reviewed the article, Nicholas Perry. Damage control is underway. I'm not here for damage control, he replied, voice clipped. I'm here for truth correction. A murmur rippled across the table. Nicholas Perry continued. For the last few decades, this board has treated Harding Global and the estate as separate empires. But they're not. What happens in that house echoes in every donation, every PR campaign, every community event with our name on it. He reached into a folder and pulled out a copy of his mother's original will. This document was concealed knowingly, its contents erased from the revised version you all approved years ago. Ellison narrowed her eyes. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, Brittany said, speaking for the first time. It's a fact of several heads turned toward her, startled at her interruption. She leaned forward, calm but firm. This will include a mandate, a trust for the estate staff, a redistribution of wealth based on service, not blood. It was Ashley Thompson's Harding who removed it, and you, knowingly or not, endorsed that removal. A heavy silence fell. One board member, Mr. Callahan, cleared his throat. Let's assume, for argument's sake, this is true. What do you propose? Nicholas Perry stepped in. We reinstate the Harding Staff Trust Fund retroactively, fully funded. We publicly acknowledge the mistake. Ellison scoffed. Do you understand what that will do to our standing with our legacy donors? Brittany looked her dead in the eyes. If your donors pull funding because the staff was finally treated like human beings, then maybe they shouldn't have their names on your buildings. Ellison opened her mouth, but Nicholas Perry cut in. She's right. We don't need investors who flinch at decency. And let me be clear. If the board votes against this motion, I will dissolve Harding Global as it stands. I will walk away from the name, the title, the inheritance. We will start again, and the public will know why. Gasps, sharp inhales, panic thinly veiled. Brittany watched as their carefully constructed control unraveled, not with shouting, but with choice. Nicholas Perry sat down again. So, let's vote. The final tally, 7 inches favor, 4 opposed, 2 abstaining. The motion passed. Ma's hands were steady as she gathered her notes. Beside her, Nicholas Perry closed his folder with quiet satisfaction. As the room began to clear, one board member, a woman in her 60s named Lorraine Beckett, paused by Brittany's chair. "I didn't vote for you," she said, "but I was wrong. You remind me of someone I worked for once years ago. She got fired for being too honest." Brittany nodded. "Then I hope she's proud of you for staying in the room this time." Lorraine blinked, smiled faintly, and walked away. In the elevator ride down, Brittany exhaled for the first time in hours. Nicholas Perry leaned against the back wall, staring at her. "What?" she asked. He shook his head, smiling. "You were terrifying." She laughed, soft but real. "So were you." "No," he said. "I was angry. You were unstoppable." Brittany shrugged. "We're not done. You know that." "Not even close," he said. Back at the estate, Vera had baked a peach cobbler, her stress ritual of choice, and the sweet smell filled the kitchen. "How'd it go?" she asked, sliding a warm slice onto a plate for Brittany. "We won," Brittany said. Vera stared at her. "Like, really? Trust is reinstated." Nicholas Perry put his entire inheritance on the line. Vera blinked, then muttered, "I guess we're not in the servants' quarters anymore." Brittany laughed, then grew quiet. "I don't know how to exist like this." You'll learn," Vera said. "Just don't forget how to exist like that." She pointed toward the window, where the garden shimmered in the post. "Rain Sunday." Brittany looked, her expression softening. "I won't." That night, she wandered through the house barefoot, letting her fingers trail across the banister, the stone, the polished wood. She paused in front of her portrait, now framed beside Henry's, Vera's, and Janet's. The quote beneath her face read, "Power is not what you inherit, it's what you survive," she whispered to the stillness. "We're still here." And this time, the house seemed to answer back, not with silence, but with belonging. The marble floor of the foyer was slick with rainwater. Brittany stood near the grand staircase, clutching an umbrella and watching Vera chase muddy footprints with a mop. The summer storm had blown in quick and loud, soaking the gardens and knocking out the estate's front security gate system. "Henry's resetting the power," Vera said, not looking up. "Damn gate's older than the fireplace." Brittany nodded, distracted. She wasn't thinking about the gate or the mud. Her mind was on a voicemail she'd received just an hour ago. It was from Detective Selena Voss. "We've received new information regarding Ashley Thompson's Harding's estate filings. There's an irregularity. I think you'll want to hear this in person." By noon, Brittany and Nicholas Perry were seated in the detective's small office downtown. Rain dotted the window like static. Voss didn't waste time with pleasantries. This was brought to my attention by a former Harding estate accountant. He recently retired and cleaned out an old safe deposit box. Inside, he found a ledger, a private one. Nicholas Perry leaned forward. "Private? It tracks off the books, expenses, payouts, legal donations." Voss slid the copy across the desk. "This ledger confirms what we suspected about Ashley Thompson's control over staff finances. But it also goes further, much further." Brittany's eyes moved down the column of handwritten entries. There were familiar names: Janet, Rosa, even Henry. But then one entry stopped her cold. The 12th of March, 2017, $40,000. Staff settlement. Brittany W. Note. Silence clause signed. She blinked. Nicholas Perry read it aloud. "That's impossible." "I've never signed anything like that," Brittany said, her voice sharp. "And I certainly didn't receive any payment." Voss nodded. "That's why this matters. This payment exists on paper only." Ma stared at her. "You're saying it was forged?" Voss leaned back. "I'm saying it was likely used as justification on paper to block future promotions, possibly to discredit you internally if needed. It paints you as someone who settled quietly." Nicholas Perry's fists clenched, and if anyone tried to stand up for her, that entry would be all they needed to shut it down. Brittany felt her chest tighten. She planned the eraser in advance. Voss nodded. "She buried you in a lie before you even had a chance to rise." Back at the estate, thunder cracked as they arrived. Brittany moved like a ghost through the halls, memories crawling up her spine. Every conversation with Ashley Thompson now echoed differently. Every cold glance, every subtle dismissal, it had all been planned. Not just resistance, sabotage. Nicholas Perry followed close behind. Well, go public. Brittany stopped at the foot of the staircase. No, no. She turned slowly. If we go public now, it'll be about revenge. I don't want revenge, Nicholas Perry. I want reclamation. He tilted his head. So, what do you suggest? We show them the truth. But not with headlines. With history, with her own words, she walked briskly toward the library. Nicholas Perry trailed behind, still confused. What are we looking for? He asked. Her journals, her letters. There were hundreds. She used to write obsessively. No, but most of them were destroyed. No, Brittany said, pulling a small brass key from her pocket. Most of them were hidden. She led him to a concealed cabinet behind the wall-length bookshelf. She'd discovered it months ago while cleaning, but hadn't known the key's purpose until now. Inside, stacked neatly and tied with silk ribbons, were over 40 leather-bound journals, Ashley Thompson's personal writings stretching back decades. Brittany held one out. If there's any truth left in this house, it's in here. They read for hours, side by side on the library floor, lightning flashing outside. The words were cold, calculated, and cruel at times, but they also revealed something Brittany hadn't expected. Fear. Brittany feared the estate slipping from her control, feared Nicholas Perry becoming soft, feared Brittany, though not for her color or class, but for her clarity. One passage stood out. Brittany Hayes watches everything. Reminds me of Margaret before she left. There's steel in that girl. I see it in her silences. She's the kind you can't own. You can only delay. Nicholas Perry closed the journal softly. She was afraid of you, he said. Brittany stared at the fire, her face unreadable. No, she murmured. She was afraid of being forgotten. That night, Brittany gathered the staff in the garden under the old oak tree. The rain had stopped. The ground was soft, but the air was clear. She held Ashley Thompson's journal in one hand and the ledger in the other. I found something today, she said, voice calm but resonant, something that tried to rewrite my story before I'd even had a chance to live it. She looked around at the faces she knew so well, Henry, Vera, Janet, Rosa, and the newer hires who still watched her with quiet reverence. I won't let anyone decide what I stood for. She held up the journal, her voice, her fear, her control. It stops here. Then she placed the ledger into the fire pit and struck a match. The flames curled upward, devouring the paper. No spectacle, no vengeance, just fire, clean and final. Nicholas Perry stepped beside her. What about the rest? Brittany looked up at the oak's towering branches. Well, keep the truth, and we'll tell it, but on our terms, slowly, steadily, as long as this house stands. As the flames faded, the wind picked up gently, scattering ash into the dark sky, and Brittany stood at the center of it all, not as a survivor, but as the storm itself. The hallway outside the East Wing nursery was dim and quiet, lit only by the pale morning sun filtering through linen curtains. Brittany walked slowly, barefoot, a coffee mug in her hands and her thoughts far away. After the fire, after the journals, after the ledger, it seemed the house had finally exhaled. But silence, she was learning, didn't always mean peace. As she passed the tall mirror near the nursery entrance, a small sound caught her attention. A shuffle, a whimper. She paused. Turning, she caught sight of a tiny shadow ducking into the corner, near the old service door, barely 3 feet tall. Hello, she said softly. No answer. She stepped closer, crouching low. You don't have to hide. The figure emerged, a boy, curly-haired, about 5 years old, in a dinosaur t-shirt 2 sizes too big. His cheeks were damp, and he clutched a crumpled drawing in his tiny hand. Brittany's heart jumped. Hi, she said gently. Are you lost? He sniffled, held out the paper. It was a crayon drawing 2 stick figures holding hands under a big sundae. One wore a green dress, the other had orange hair. She recognized the drawing. It was from a folder she'd seen in Nicholas Perry's office, drawn by a child named Daniel, one of the children from the Harding Foundation's foster transition program. She crouched lower. Is your name Daniel? The boy nodded, rubbing his eyes. Where's your caretaker? He pointed down the hallway. sleeping loud. Brittany stifled a smile. That happens. He shifted closer, still clinging to the drawing. You're the nice lady. She blinked. Have we met? No, Daniel whispered. But they said you fixed the house. Nicholas Perry found them in the sunroom 30 minutes later. Daniel curled in Brittany's lap, still holding his picture. Brittany was telling a story about a giraffe who wanted to fly. Nicholas Perry froze in the doorway. You found him? He said. Brittany looked up. He was hiding by the service door, said his caretaker. Snoring scared him. Nicholas Perry chuckled and stepped forward. I should have warned you. He's got a habit of escaping naps. He also has a habit of drawing sunshine, she added, showing Nicholas Perry the crumpled page. Nicholas Perry softened. He's been through a lot. His mother passed last year. His father wasn't safe. Brittany nodded slowly. And now he's here. Nicholas Perry crouched beside her temporarily, but the foundation is trying to expand. Build a proper child transition wing. Daniel might be the first of many. Brittany looked at the boy sleeping now with his head against her chest. He thought I fixed the house. You did? No, she said, brushing a curl from Daniel's forehead. He might. That evening they gathered in the parlor for a small meeting with the Foundation's board of educators and community liaison. Brittany sat beside Nicholas Perry, but this time she wasn't just attending. She was leading. We've cleared the east wing, she began. We'll convert the guest rooms into long-term suites. Create a space for kids in transition. Not just housing, but stability, healing. A woman from Child Services raised a brow. You're housing foster children at Harding Estate. Yes, Brittany said firmly. Children who have no other place to go. Another voice skeptical. It's not exactly standard protocol. Brittany smiled. Neither was I. Nicholas Perry spoke next. The estate has the room, the resources, the structure. What it lacked was the will to see beyond legacy. That changes now. There were murmurs, concern, surprise, but no strong resistance. Because the world was watching now, and even those who preferred silence couldn't deny what they saw. Late that night, Brittany stood in the east wing, now cleaned and quiet. The old guest rooms had already been stripped down to basics: beds, warm lighting, a bookshelf, fresh linens. Daniel was the first, but not the last. She opened the window to let in the night air. Behind her, Nicholas Perry leaned against the door frame. You okay? She nodded. I used to dream about escaping this house. Huh? And now I dream about what it can become. Nicholas Perry stepped beside her. You remember what you told me once? That justice isn't about revenge, it's about reclamation. She nodded. He smiled. Then this is justice. She looked out over the grounds, her gaze steady, her heart full. We're just getting started. That weekend, the staff gathered for the first Harding Estate family dinner. No uniforms, no assigned seating, just food and music, and long conversations. Daniel sat between Rosa and Henry, babbling about flying giraffes. When dessert was served, Vera stood and tapped her glass. I got a toast, she announced. To Brittany Hayes, our storm, our steel, our sister. You walked into this house and shook it down to its bones. You stood taller than they ever expected. And now you're building something even bigger. Brittany stood, blinking back tears. She raised her glass. To the ones who stayed. And the room echoed back. To the ones who stayed. H. It was just past dawn when Brittany stepped out into the garden, the dew still clinging to the grass like silver lace. A light fog hung low over the hedges, wrapping the world in a gentle silence. She walked barefoot along the gravel path, her robe pulled tight against the cool morning air, her thoughts drifting to the journal entries, still laid out on her nightstand. Ashley Thompson's words. Sharp, calculated, often cruel, but occasionally jarringly human. She'd spent the previous night reading one entry over and over. I fear what Brittany could become, not because she is wrong, but because she reminds me of the version of myself I killed to fit into this life. The sentence haunted her, not because it was flattering, but because it felt like a confession, not of guilt, but of defeat. At the edge of the garden, beneath the ancient fig tree, Brittany paused. There was a marble bench there, Ashley Thompson's favorite spot, and for the first time, Brittany saw not the ghost of a tyrant, but of a woman broken by the machinery she helped preserve. She sat, her hand resting on the cold marble. "I'm not here to curse you," she whispered, "but I won't protect your silence anymore." Behind her, the soft creak of footsteps approached. Nicholas Perry. He held out a steaming mug. "Vera sent this. Said you'd be out here trying to haunt ghosts." Brittany took the cup with a smile. "She's not wrong." Nicholas Perry said, "Basil here. You found something in the journals, didn't you?" "Yes," she said. "I found out that Ashley Thompson once believed in change, then buried that belief beneath fear." Nicholas Perry nodded slowly. "That sounds like her." Brittany stared out at the trees, the sky just beginning to warm with light. "She feared me," Brittany continued, "because I reminded her of the parts she lost or maybe gave up." Nicholas Perry didn't reply at first. Then he asked, "Do you think that's what's waiting for me? That kind of fear?" She turned to him. "Only if you stop listening." He took a breath, long and slow. "I don't want to become what this house used to demand." "Then don't," she said gently. "You're not your mother. You're the one who let the doors open." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I didn't just open the doors, Brittany. I walked through them because of you." Later that morning, the first children arrived, not in a parade of fanfare, but in quiet cars with social workers and tired eyes, 3 boys and 2 girls, ages 6 to 12. Each carried a duffel bag or a small suitcase and wore the same wary expression. Brittany knew too well the look of someone trained to expect temporary care and sudden rejection. The staff stood ready. Vera with a tray of warm cookies, Rosa holding juice boxes, Janet with soft blankets folded over her arms. Brittany greeted each child by name, kneeling to meet their eyes, never towering, never judging. Nicholas Perry stayed near the back, his presence quiet but protective. When one of the girls, Lena, aged 9, shied away from entering the room, Brittany extended her hand without pressure. "You don't have to come in," she said. "But if you want to, there's a room with your name on the door, and it has a bookshelf taller than me." Lena looked past her, then back. Slowly, she reached for Brittany's hand. Inside, the children were given rooms, not dorms. They were offered routines, not rules. And perhaps most importantly, they were offered dignity without needing to earn it. By evening, laughter returned to the East Wing for the first time in decades. That night, Nicholas Perry hosted a dinner for foundation donors in the estate ballroom. It was Brittany's idea to move the event from the city to the house itself. "Let them see what they're supporting," she'd said. The guests came in expensive suits, curious and cautious. They were greeted not by a butler, but by Vera, who gave every person the same look that said, "Behave yourself. This is holy ground now." Brittany wore navy blue, not a dress meant to impress, but one meant to belong. She moved through the room with quiet command. During the dinner, Nicholas Perry stood and raised his glass. "This house has always been about legacy," he began. "But for too long, legacy was defined by inheritance, wealth, bloodlines." He glanced at Brittany across the room. "Today, we define it differently. Legacy is not what you build for yourself, but what you build for others, especially when no one is watching." He lifted his glass higher, to the unseen, the unheard, the unstoppable. "To Brittany," someone murmured, and then others echoed it. To Brittany, she stood slowly, stunned, but instead of basking in it, she raised her own glass. "To the ones who cleaned this house when no one clapped, to the ones who stayed when it wasn't safe, to the kids learning to trust again, this is the legacy." The room went quiet, then erupted in applause. Not polite, not performative, but real. Later that night, Nicholas Perry found her on the upstairs balcony barefoot, arms resting on the iron rail. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I think I'm full. Like when the day finally stopped spinning." I stepped beside her. Below, the estate glowed warm in the darkness. Soft lamps and windows, shadows moving gently through hallways, music still echoing faintly from the ballroom. "You remember when you first got here?" he asked. Brittany smirked. "Which time? When I was scrubbing the baseboards or when you thought I stole the porcelain vase?" He laughed. "Both." "I remember," she said quieter now. "I remember thinking I'd never be anything but invisible here." Nicholas Perry turned to face her fully. And now she looked up at the stars, clear and stubborn above the old house. Now I'm the part they'll never forget. The night sky was velvet and deep, the kind of darkness that didn't frighten Brittany anymore. From her bedroom window, she could see the west wing, once closed, shuttered, and filled with relics of control, now glowing faintly with new life. Children's laughter had woven itself into the walls. It was a different kind of music than the house had ever known. But peace, she was learning, was never permanent. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Brittany Hayes. The voice was calm, clipped, professional. Yes. Who's this? My name is Agent Claire Dennison. I'm with the Department of Justice. We need to speak privately. They met the next morning in a quiet federal building on the outskirts of the city. The conference room was bare, no windows, just neutral walls and steel chairs. Agent Dennison slid a file across the table. What you're about to see is sensitive. We believe you may be a key witness in an investigation involving fraudulent financial practices tied to the Harding Foundation, dating back more than 10 years. Brittany felt a chill crawl up her spine. I don't understand. The board just approved the trust fund. Everything's being corrected. Dennis tapped the file. That's the surface. What's underneath is bigger. Offshore accounts, shell charities, money that disappeared from foundation grants, especially those meant for underserved communities. Brittany opened the folder and gasped. A list of names, most of them unfamiliar, but two stood out. Ashley Thompson's Harding, Margaret Ellison, and under both signatures authorizing distributions to non-existent projects in Appalachia and rural Louisiana. She looked up. I had no idea. Dennis nodded. We don't think Nicholas Perry did either, but Ashley Thompson's influence didn't end when she died. Her legacy of control left landmines. Why me? Brittany asked. Why am I a witness? Dennis looked her square in the eye. Because you're the only one who challenged the structure. And because your promotion forced several board members to panic. One of them came to us with documents. Brittany's throat went dry. Who? Dennis didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out a photo. It was a security camera still. Brittany recognized the hallway instantly. It was the estate. The timestamp was 3 nights ago. The image showed a shadowed figure slipping into the West Wing office after hours. The label below the image, Janet E. Carter. Brittany stared at it in disbelief. Janet? No, that's not possible. Dennison was firm. We believe she accessed records, stored during Ashley Thompson's time, possibly under duress, possibly to protect herself. Either way, she's at the center now. Back at the estate, Brittany walked the long hallway to the laundry room where Janet was folding linens like it was any other day. Her movements were calm, her posture perfect as it had always been. Janet, Maja said quietly. The woman looked up, her face unreadable. We need to talk. Janet paused, folded one last towel, then set it down. I figured this day might come, she said. I just didn't expect you to be the one holding the match. I'm not here to burn you, Brittany said. But I need the truth. Janet sat slowly, smoothing her apron. I started working here when I was 23. Back then, Ashley Thompson ran the place like a fortress. I did what I had to do to survive. That meant looking away, signing things I didn't understand, saying, Yes, ma'am. When I wanted to scream, Brittany listened, her jaw tense. When you came, Janet continued, I saw what could change, but I also saw what it would cost. Ashley Thompson's might be dead, but her rules still breathing. Mal, you went into the office, Brittany said. I did, Janet admitted, but not to steal. To bury something I should have burned years ago. She opened a drawer nearby and pulled out a sealed envelope. This is the last of it. Letters between Ashley Thompson and Ellison. Proof of how they funneled grant money into their personal portfolios. I didn't want to believe it, but there it is. Brittany took the envelope. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Janet's eyes welled with tears. Because I thought protecting the house meant hiding the shame. But you're showing us another way. Brittany softened. It's not too late. Janet stood. Then take it and do what I was too afraid to do. That evening, Nicholas Perry joined Brittany on the terrace overlooking the East Garden. She told him everything. The DOJ investigation, Janet's confession, the buried documents. He sat quietly, absorbing the truth. Then he nodded. We'll cooperate fully. Whatever they need. Brittany looked at him, surprised. "You're not angry. I'm tired of pretending this house didn't grow out of rot," he said. "Let them tear out the roots if they have to. What we build next, it'll be cleaner." He reached for her hand, warm and steady. "You okay?" he asked. Brittany stared at the moon rising above the treetops. "No, but I'm ready." The following morning, Brittany stood before the staff once more, this time not with hope in her voice, but truth. "There's an investigation," she began, "and some of the people we trusted made decisions that betrayed that trust. But we are not that betrayal. We are the ones who stayed, who kept the lights on, who raised each other." She looked at Janet, who stood at the back with her chin high. "We don't have to carry the sins of this house any longer." Silence. Then Vera stepped forward and said, "Then let's build something that doesn't need secrets." And one by one, they nodded. Later that night, alone in her room, Brittany lit a candle and opened one of Ashley Thompson's last journals. The pages crackled. The final entry read, "If the house ever learns to love again, it will be because someone taught it how." Brittany closed the book and smiled. The courthouse downtown buzzed with reporters, their cameras aimed like weapons. Headlines had already filled the morning papers. Harding Foundation under federal investigation. A billionaire's house of lies. From maid to whistleblower, Brittany Hayes speaks out. But inside, the courtroom was silent. Brittany sat near the front, flanked by Nicholas Perry on one side and Agent Dennison on the other. Janet sat quietly behind her, no longer hiding. No longer afraid, her back was straight, and in her eyes was something Brittany hadn't seen in her before. Resolve. The prosecutor, a lean, focused woman named Vera Mendes, stood before the judge. "Your Honor," she began, "what we are dealing with is not simply embezzlement. It is the systemic manipulation of charitable funds by a powerful family over a decade or more. These funds were meant for children, for communities, for those without a voice, and instead, they were redirected to private accounts. The paper trail was intentionally buried until now." She glanced back at Brittany, offering a small nod. During recess, Brittany stepped out into the hallway to breathe. The building was old, with heavy marble columns and drafty corridors. Her heels echoed across the floor, but her thoughts were far louder. Nicholas Perry followed. "They're painting you like a hero," he said. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm a witness, a survivor, not a saint." He leaned on the wall beside her. "Maybe, but you're the reason the story didn't end in silence." She turned toward him. "You know what scares me most." "What?" "That when this is over, people will think the house is clean. That because we burned the ledgers and turned over documents, everything is fixed." Nicholas Perry nodded slowly. "But it's not." "No," she said. "Not yet. Healing isn't the same as justice. It's messier, longer." Inside the courtroom, Janet was called to testify. She walked to the stand with her hands steady, voice clear. "I was a housekeeper at the Harding estate for over 25 years. I cleaned the rooms where secrets were made. I signed documents I didn't understand because I believed my job was survival, not truth. But watching Brittany, I realized silence was betrayal." The room held its breath. "I stand here today not because I was brave," she continued, "but because someone else showed me how to be." When she stepped down, she passed Brittany and whispered, "Thank you." Brittany only squeezed her hand. The trial took 5 days. The defense tried to deflect, claimed Ashley Thompson was dead, that the records were incomplete, that Brittany promotion was motivated by money, but the facts didn't bend. Not this time. In the end, the judge ruled restitution to be paid by the remaining Harding family trust. Foundation control transferred to an independent ethical board. A formal apology issued to all misused grant recipients, and most critically full legal exoneration and recognition for Brittany Hayes as a protected whistleblower. The court erupted in murmurs. Nicholas Perry reached for her hand. "You did it," he said, but Brittany shook her head. "We did it." That resounded her for days. News vans outside the estate, interview requests, editorials, TV appearances. She declined all of them. Instead, she focused on the East Wing on Daniel, who was learning to play piano, and Lena, who had started painting flowers in every room she entered. She cleaned the kitchen on Sundays, sat in the garden with Janet on Wednesdays, and met with the new ethics board every Friday. The house was still old, still flawed, but it was changing, and it remembered now not the legacy of silence, but the sound of voices rising. One afternoon, Brittany visited her old room, the one off the servants' hallway, with the small window and the creaky floorboards. She found a notebook tucked in the drawer, one she hadn't opened in years. Inside were journal entries she'd written during her first weeks at the estate. I don't belong here. They don't see me. I miss my mother. I miss being seen. She closed the book and whispered to her past self. We made it. Then she walked out and didn't look back. That weekend, the Harding estate held its first open day, a community celebration with music, food, tours, and workshops for local families. Former staff came back as guests. Foundation children played tag on the lawn. Vera flipped burgers. Henry ran a gardening demo. Rosa taught kids how to bake cornbread. Brittany stood near the edge of it all, a lemonade in her hand, watching. Nicholas Perry approached, holding a picnic basket. There's a rumor going around, he said. Oh, she smirked. That you're thinking of starting your own foundation? Rumors spread fast, she replied. He offered her a folder. Inside, a proposal, a new trust, her name on the masthead, the Hayes House Project. She stared at it. Quiet. It's yours, he said. Run it your way. She looked at the crowd, at the lives blooming where silence once lived, and she nodded. It's time. And that night, as fireworks shimmered in the sky above the estate, Ma stood under the same oak tree where she'd once burned the ledger. This time, she wasn't alone. The staff stood around her, and the children held sparklers like tiny stars. She raised her voice. This house was built with secrets, but now it's growing something else. She looked at Nicholas Perry, then at Daniel beside her. Truth, family, and a future none of us have to survive. We get to live it. The crowd erupted in applause, and someone passed her a sparkler. She held it up, and the house behind her, old, imperfect, and finally honest, glowed in the firelight. Autumn had arrived in New Haven. The Harding estate, once brooding and monolithic, now blushed with color ivy curling along the stone, leaves scattering across the front steps like a welcome mat from nature itself. The trees whispered in golds and reds. The air held the bite of something ending and something beginning. Inside the east wing, laughter echoed. Children chased one another through the halls, their shoes tapping joy into the floorboards. Rosa handed out pumpkin muffins wrapped in parchment. Janet was decorating the common room with hand-painted signs that read things like, "You belong here, and this house sees you." In the study, Nicholas Perry and Brittany sat across from each other. No suits, no titles, just worn flannel and the shared silence of two people who had weathered a storm together. "You sure you want to do this?" Nicholas Perry asked, holding out a manila folder. She nodded. It's time. The folder contained the final deed, transfer. The Harding estate, long guarded by bloodlines and legacy, would now become the permanent headquarters of the Hayes House Project, an educational and transitional sanctuary for children in foster care, displaced families, and young adults aging out of the system. Brittany had refused to name it after herself, but the board insisted. "You were the fire that woke this place up," Vera had said. "Let it carry your name so others know they can burn through lies, too." Nicholas Perry signed first, then Brittany. And in that moment, the house was reborn, not inherited, earned. The ceremony was small. No press, no photographers, just staff, children, friends, and neighbors. It was held beneath the old oak tree, the same one where Brittany once stood in the rain, accused and broken. Now she stood there as the founder of something that would outlive them all. Janet spoke first. "For 25 years, I served this house like a loyal ghost," she said. "But it took Brittany to remind me that loyalty doesn't mean silence, and that ghosts don't raise children, people do. Then Vera, this is more than a home. It's a declaration that no child is disposable, that no worker is invisible. That legacy isn't built in silence. It's built in sweat, in stories, and in the courage to tell the truth out loud." Finally, Nicholas Perry stepped forward. "I grew up in a house full of rules and reputation, but Brittany taught me that real power isn't who sits at the head of the table, it's who makes sure everyone has a seat at it." Then he looked at her, and today we passed the house to the one who truly made it a home. Brittany stepped up to the makeshift podium. A breeze lifted her hair. She wasn't shaking. Not anymore. I was once the maid who mopped this floor. The girl who ate dinner on the steps. The woman they told to keep quiet, keep low, keep out of the way. She paused. But I listened to my own voice instead. I listened to the children who had none. I listened to the cracks in the walls, to the stories buried in ledgers and linen closets. And I chose not to be silent. No. She scanned the faces before her. Rosa smiling, Henry wiping away a tear. Little Daniel holding Lena's hand. This isn't just my story, Brittany continued. It's ours, and it doesn't end here. It grows every time someone walks through these doors and hears a yes instead of a you can't. Every time a child is believed. Every time truth is louder than fear. She raised her hand to justice without revenge, to family without condition, and to the light that stayed. They echoed her to the light that stayed. And for the first time in decades, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt whole. That evening, after the crowd had gone and the children were tucked in, Brittany walked alone through the hallways. She passed the grand staircase, the parlor, the old study where she'd once been accused of theft. Each room felt like a chapter she had finished writing. In the library, the journal still sat on the shelf. Ashley Thompson's words, untouched since the trial. Brittany didn't hate her anymore. She simply understood. Fear had made Ashley Thompson a warden, but Brittany had chosen to become a gardener. And this house? It had bloomed. She stepped outside to the back porch where Nicholas Perry was waiting with 2 mugs of cider. You think it'll last? He asked. Brittany looked up at the stars. No, she said softly. But we'll fight for it anyway. He handed her a mug. Then let's keep building. They clinked their mugs together. Below them, the estate glowed warm light in every window, soft music from the nursery, and laughter from the kitchen. The kind of light that doesn't demand attention, it just stays. The story of Brittany Hayes teaches us that true justice is not found in silence, but in the courage to speak the truth, especially when it's uncomfortable. It reminds us that legacy isn't built through bloodlines or wealth, but through compassion, integrity, and the willingness to challenge broken systems. Brittany's journey from being dismissed as invisible to becoming the heart of change proves that healing begins when we choose to see the unseen, defend the voiceless, and believe in a future shaped by dignity, not fear.